Welcome back to See You on the Other Side. We are so excited for what we have for you guys today.
We had an amazing interview with Katy Walker. She is the CEO of Revitalist, which has a location in Louisville, but she has 9 locations total. She is a total boss.
She's a boss ass bitch.
She is a boss ass bitch. She's a bab.
Bab.
Yeah, I call them babs.
Oh my God, I think that's a thing, and I totally forgot about that. Like she's a badass.
Yeah, no, we were very inspired by her with the information that she shared, and obviously the knowledge that she is going to give in this episode, but also she was just an awesome person with an amazing vibe, and Leah and I are so energized right now just talking
like
to
my
her.
cheeks still hurt because
Yes.
we were like the whole episode we were just like smiling and just wowing and
we enjoyed her so much. We will definitely try to have her on.
I kind of want to hang out with her.
Yeah, me too.
Like, do you want to be friends?
Yeah. What are you doing later?
What are you doing this weekend? So what's interesting is like I don't know much about ketamine,
And I don't either.
but we talked to Kyler in an episode. Oh my God, was it last month? And he talked about ketamine and doing it recreationally and all these things called like K-holes and stuff. And I'm like, what the fuck? I've never done it, never had a desire to, but I hear about the healing benefits and how I'm much more open now than I ever was like years and years ago to
Same.
like, if you're going to tell me it does this and this, I want to experience that. I want to go down my rabbit holes. I want to research this.
Yeah.
So I went down a rabbit hole because that's what I do. A ketamine
Leah
rabbit hole.
is Alice. She's always going to go down the rabbit hole.
I'm always going to go down the rabbit hole for you guys. When you guys are scared to go down the holes, I'll go down them for you and share the information. But I sent you a couple of podcasts about it, and we were listening to them, and I was like, holy shit. What's interesting is Lamar Odom did ketamine therapy.
Oh,
remember that?
Well, I didn't realize it was ketamine that he did.
He did ketamine first, and then he did ibogaine.
Okay.
But he did like a treatment of ketamine infusions for first. Like it was like this was his dose. He was going to do ketamine and then ibogaine for his addiction. So I went down this rabbit hole. There is a documentary coming out about him called Lamar Reborn. Mm-hmm. Is that what it's called? Or like Lamar Odom Reborn. And it goes into his addictions because if you follow him or the Kardashians, he went through a very public overdose.
Well, and then his mom died when he was very, very young.
Mm-hmm.
His dad was an addict.
Mm-hmm. He had a child die and a grandmother die the same day.
Yeah, he experienced a lot of trauma very early on and then throughout his life. So he had complex trauma, because isn't complex trauma when it
like repetitive?
Yeah, like a lot of things happened.
Like CPTSD, like complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
But he has had 6 heart attacks, 12 strokes, was in a coma, like all of these things. And he was like, oh, but I'll never do psychedelics because my mom said not to, or something crazy the way he said it. But then he did them.
Well, and you're like, you won't do psychedelics, but
you're doing like
had an overdose with strippers.
Like, what is the stigma? Why is that the line you won't cross?
Yeah.
Especially when people are telling you it could help you.
I think just societal.
You're right. It's like this conditioning
Norms
and these agreements that we're like, okay, I'll take your word for it without really going down our rabbit holes. That's why I'm the rabbit hole goer. Mm-hmm. So from what I pulled up in my rabbit hole and what I was hearing and reading and listening to, it's not a psychedelic. It is a dissociative anesthetic. It is used in hospitals for anesthesia. It used to be used in veterinary clinics back in the 70s and 80s.
It was used during war too, right?
I think so.
I'm almost positive it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go down a rabbit hole later. But
and people who tried to commit suicide.
Okay, and that's what they were finding. They were using these substances. You're right. She said that, and they were like fixing them. Mm-hmm. So it's like, wait a minute, what is this doing to people? It's almost like how LSD was ingested on accident, and he had like such a great experience that he was like, "What just happened?"
Because they would give people who tried to commit suicide ketamine to try to calm down, and then they saw like, okay, like a time after, they're still not struggling with depression or whatever it was, and so they're like, okay, what is it about this that?
Why is this doing this?
This is having a long-term effect.
Like these side effects are good.
Right. Yeah.
And these are like good side effects.
Yeah.
So I guess with psychedelics in our use of the words like mushrooms and LSD and things like ayahuasca, there's an integration process that's required afterwards because it's not going to fix you. It's not a quick fix. It's going to go in and it's going to show you what needs to be worked on, but it is up to you as the individual taking these substances to integrate that experience into your daily life. And that sometimes doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes we're not capable of doing that. But from what I understood, ketamine goes in and it just does the work for you.
Yeah. And then you are kind of able to look at certain things that had happened and you're able to see it from a more objective point of view. Yeah. Which is pretty crazy.
It's pretty incredible,
because some of the stuff, that has happened to all of us can be very, very painful to go back to that time and remember it and talk about it.
Well, and what's interesting, you're saying that, and a lot of the people that I've talked to about my experiences who are, depressed and struggle with anxiety are afraid to do them. And one of the number one things, and I feel like you said this too, like you're afraid of experiencing something traumatic again.
Yeah,
even if it's not real, you don't want to feel that again.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like what Henry shared on previous podcasts if all of those things happened, those bad things happened at one time, I mean, it would kill you just because it's so traumatic. Mm-hmm. And so the fear is doing all of this stuff is that those things are going to happen. And you felt like you barely lived through it back then.
You don't want to go through it again.
Right. So how are you going to go through that again and not only like be able to get through it, but come out thriving?
Right.
People can't comprehend that.
No. Which is so you guys will hear Katy talk about this in this episode, how that's not what it is. That's not what happens with this. And I don't even think that that's what happens with psychedelics, but there are bad trips, and I do think that people associate those things, those traumatic events with what if it shows up in a trip and then I have a bad trip, So it's interesting.
Yep. So
how many acronyms does she have under her name?
A lot.
A lot.
She is an MSN, APRN, CRNA, and SPMHNP. I don't even know what.
And now she's a CEO.
And now she is adding to that CEO. But she opened Revitalist in 2018 and now has a location in Louisville, but she has 9 locations total. So yes, they do offer ketamine, but also they offer TMS, vitamin infusions, acupuncture, massage, counseling, mental wellness, coaching, teletherapy, athletic mental health advocacy. I mean, it's pretty remarkable, and this is something that is legal. And, we've talked about before, this is a podcast of hope, that we live in a time right now where there is a lot of vitriol. There's a lot of vitriol in the news, on social media, at each other. And all of that is coming from an unhealed place. And we've talked about psychedelics. Obviously, that's what the premise of our podcast is. But this is giving But a lot of people are hesitant about going down that road because of the legalities of it. Mm-hmm. We are now giving you a lifeline where there is a legal option that can help and fix a lot of mental health struggles. And we're just so excited for you guys to hear this. And oftentimes we get in our own way.
Yeah.
We get in our own way. And it's easy to project and point fingers, but oftentimes it's a lot harder to kind of take a more introspective look at ourselves and what we can do and the shift that we can make and how we can be better and how we can make our life better. And hopefully you guys listening to this episode, this will give you, again, throwing another lifeline of hope your way. So
I hope so. I hope they get some business from us.
Oh, they will. Whether it's going to be me and you.
All right. We actually have appointments next week. No, that's what's interesting about it is because I've looked at the criteria and I'm like, oh shit, I don't fit that anymore. Like, yeah. But 2 years ago or even last summer, I would have. There's like a thing on her website where you can like fill it out to see if you are a candidate for these treatments. And I would have been 100%. And I think a lot of us would be right now. So I can't wait for you guys to hear this. Yeah. So buckle up, Buttercup.
Ooh. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm fastening that seatbelt
on to your hats.
Because Katie's about to rock your world.
Oh my God. I'm so excited. Check it out.
I'm honestly shocked that we got this interview, but I'm very, very, very excited. So.
Oh, you guys are sweet. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I'm here to help.
Okay. So can you let our listeners know who you are and what you do and a little bit about why you're in the field that you're in today?
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Katy Walker. I'm the CEO of Revitalist Lifestyle and Wellness. My background is I was a nurse. I've actually worked in the hospital I started in the hospital when I was 16, so I'm 38 now. So I grew up really more so in the hospital setting. Became a nurse when I was 21. Worked in ICU for about 8 years at a level 1 trauma, which is one of your highest, you can't get any worse of the worst kind of patients there. So went back to anesthesia school, got my advanced degree in anesthesia, and then I created Revitalist, which is the company I'm the CEO now of. Created that back in 2018. And with that company, the reason I created it was primarily to give ketamine infusions, focusing, on mental health, wellness, pain, all those different pieces of. People ask me, how did I really get into that? Honestly, I don't know. Ketamine it's an anesthetic drug. So I was good with using ketamine. I've always connected, I think, a little bit with people. And you seeing the data on that, I was really impressed. So at the time, I had a daughter who was, Gab was probably 5. She's 12 now. But I opened the clinic to try to get a better work-life balance because I was going to 5 hospitals and doing call and neuro and hearts and different pieces and OB. And so I opened the clinic thinking it would be kind of where I could just do it part-time and I could really do the mom thing, And now I'm the CEO of a company that has 9 locations and it's on 3 securities exchanges. So I read that one wrong.
Whoops. It's all right.
But I do think there's a really cool need. There's a cool niche. I think there's something special. I'm learning that my uniqueness may not be a bad thing. But I'm learning that growing up in the hospital setting, really starting as a nursing assistant and then really working my way up. And understanding, the connectivity from the nursing aspect. And really that doesn't exist as much as we want it to out in the world. So there's awesome women like you that are, helping to advocate, get the word out, different pieces like that. And it's necessary because we live in a big old world of people that are reactive, that like to hide behind screens per se and like to tell you how bad of a job you're doing. There's not a lot of people that will actually jump out into the fire and help advocate for others. So, that's what I really want to do. I really want to push this company as aggressively as possible to make as much change as possible because I don't know. It's miraculous, right? These psychedelics that we see. The youngest kid that we've actually treated was 12. The oldest person that we've had is 90. So, we've seen night and day differences with the, everything that we're doing. So it's super exciting.
That's wow. So awesome. So I guess I'm kind of curious, like what would you be doing to treat a younger child versus somebody who's older? I'm curious because my son is on the spectrum, and we have it's hard to say this out loud, but we've maybe we should microdose him. Maybe that would help him, want to connect more to people. And I know that's so taboo, but is this something that could help with that? Or what would that necessarily help with a younger child versus older?
I've had people call me about kids like babies almost, and I did used to do pediatric anesthesia, so I do understand babies pretty well, less well now that I've been doing ketamine. But kids, so I think autism is going to be its own piece, right? We actually do have a white paper that we've produced that with a 29-year-old autistic male child who didn't have a job, had never had a car, different pieces like that. He actually went out, got his driver's license. He started connecting better.
Wow.
There is some data out there. Where was it? Lancaster University in Europe. If you look at the data there, they did look at ketamine. They did look at autism. And basically what they were looking at was there was a genetic deficiency. And when ketamine stimulates the neuroplasticity, it was showing that it overcompensates for those genetic deficiencies, which allows the child to compensate better. So we have had kids in their 20s with autism specifically who have sat with therapists and such. So we set people with therapists just because it's a beautiful time to really learn about yourself. But what they really noticed is that emotional connection that you've probably noticed that they just don't have, right? They're actually able to emotionally connect during. And what it does is it almost like it subconsciously teaches it, and then it's able to duplicate it when it's not in a medicated state per se. So I do think there's going to be huge pieces with autism. The young ones that we have right now, we'll have people who call like their 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds for bad tempers, and no, we're not doing that yet, right? We're still base structure.
You just got to live through that.
Right, exactly.
You got to pay your dues.
I have a 3-year-old right now.
The adolescent, psychiatrists and stuff, I mean, they start medicating these babies when they're young, so it's unfortunate. But the kids that we have that come in, those will be the ones that have coexisting homicidality and suicidality. They've tried to hang themselves. For some reason, pediatrics want to hang themselves. One thing that I've noticed with kids especially, they usually don't want to die. They want to tell their brain to stop. So there's something in your brain called the salience network. And it is, it's a strengthening network is what they're starting to see. And, people who ruminate, it's a weakness of the brain. So if you can't drop it, it's just drop it. Some people really cannot.
Right.
And from the kids that I've talked to, when they come in after they've overdosed or whatever else, they're usually trying just to make their mind slow down, and they don't have those structures that are built to where they can stop things. So, any child who I think is ruminating, I think rumination and I think anxiety, all of those are big pieces as to why we're losing our children, to suicides and stuff. So I think the more that we can learn, the more we can teach them emotional intelligence and coping mechanisms, then the more they're going to thrive, and they don't feel like they've got to get out of this life and that's going to solve the solution. So I am a big advocate for the adolescent division for sure. But I think there's a lot that goes there. And unfortunately, when they start studying these things, we always, in traditional medicine, we go to the worst of the worst. And then we go to adults, and then we go to young adults, and then we go to pediatrics, and then we go to moms, and we go to pregnant moms. So there's this whole chain of command to where the way I'm shifting the company, or the way the company's growing, is that we're growing really to look at more risk mitigation. Because right now we're focusing on treatment resistant and all these other things. And I'm like, guys, we're treating one treatment resistant, we're losing 100 people along the way as they're trying to become treatment resistant. So we really look at the risk mitigation pieces to try to get people the help they need sooner than later.
Yeah. Well, and with COVID and everything, so many teenagers are struggling with mental health. And I see it, with my teen stepdaughters and how they've struggled throughout this whole thing. And I feel like we don't really take them into consideration that they're also going through it too. So, so my question for you is to explain to the listeners, what is ketamine? How does it work? How is it that it is able to help people in such a significant way?
Great question. So ketamine is a drug. So it's been around since 1970, believe it or not. It was FDA approved in 1970 as a dissociative anesthetic. That's what it's called. It was in the late 1990s that Yale they made an accidental discovery that ketamine breaks the cycle of mental illness, right? So we didn't really understand it. A lot of people still don't understand mental illness. But basically what the brain doesn't understand right from wrong, good from bad. It duplicates what it knows. So if you put the three of us in a room and there's a situation that comes up, each of us are going to act differently based on the experiences that we had in the past that saved us, so we're going to duplicate those efforts. Everyone believes in muscle memory, right? I mean, everyone across the whole world believes in muscle memory. And the really exciting thing is your muscles don't have memory. Your brain has the memory that controls the muscles. So that's your physical memory, but then there's also behavioral memory. Right. So behaviorally speaking, when you're going through these pieces and you have a trigger, it's because your brain was like, hey, something happened in the past. Now it's coming up again. And it's a similar pattern. So your brain likes patterns. But if it starts going down the wrong road, we don't know that. I mean, subconsciously we know that, but consciously we don't know that. Right. So what ketamine does, it's fascinating. I've been around probably 10,000 infusions or so. But what ketamine does is, it puts the brain in a neutral space. So I've talked to a lot of really smart people doing all this stuff. And one person told me that every experience that we have is neutral. But we take what our past experiences and we place it on the current experience. That's what makes our experience different, or, whatever else. That's what makes the experience. So ketamine disassociates, right? It's a dissociative anesthetic. What does that mean? Disassociation. So like right now, all of us, we have an objective and a subjective piece, right? An objective is what you view, a subjective is what you feel. So at the same time, right now, we're sitting here, we're having an emotion that's interplaced with the environment that we're in. And those two go together, and we can't see it. Our brain's way too smart. We can't see those things. What ketamine does is it disassociates those two. So it separates the subjective from the objective. And what it does is it allows subjective memory to come up. And when that subjective memory comes up, we're objectively able to analyze it. Wow. So what people do, and your brain knows, right? Your brain knows like what you're supposed to, it understands conflict. The brain does. It doesn't really know what to do with it, but it holds on to it, right?
Yeah.
So when those pieces come up, like if you're sitting there with somebody, they start feeling neutral with ketamine, they'll kind of look to the side. I'm like, what are you thinking about? And they're like, this is the craziest thing. But when I was 12 years old, there was this fish. And it was this orange fish. And, and they start like down this trail of something that you'd be like, whatever, kind of weird kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a situation that the brain didn't understand. So the brain likes check boxes, and it likes task lists, and it likes chronic, streamline pieces. So like say, whatever the goldfish story was, it was something that the brain didn't really understand at that time, and it held on to it. And it can be the stupidest little thing, but your brain held on to that piece because it didn't understand it. And then when you get to another situation in the future, it will come back, and then the brain's like, oh, okay, and it starts making its paths that way. So what happens with ketamine is when it disassociates, and say an emotion comes up, say I got raped. It comes up and I'm like, oh, I remember when I got raped. I'm not going to feel that internally. I'm going to be able to speak about it like, oh gosh, I felt so sorry for her. So we're able to treat, first responders, complex traumas, veterans, all these people, we're able to treat all this stuff because they're not having to feel it. It's coming up. They're able to analyze their brain. But I'll tell people, I'm like, it's fascinating. Like you're sitting there in first person, you see it in third person, and then you're able to, introspectively analyze it. And then literally it goes away. People will be like, what was I talking about? The brain, it just processed it. Yeah. I mean, and people, amazing. They're like, are you a wizard? No, not a wizard.
You kind of are.
I'm following a pattern. I'm like, I'm a professional drug wizard. Huh?
Yes.
But yeah, no, it's really fascinating to watch.
Wow. That's interesting. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of EMDR, but like with EMDR, sometimes you do have to experience those things or talk about them and you're still feeling.
Yeah, it's still painful.
It's still painful.
Whatever.
So I know a lot of people are resistant to EMDR because they don't want to go through that again. So this is interesting because it creates like a safe, neutral space.
Straight up. Yeah, it creates that. You don't have to lead it. That's what I'll tell people. I'm like, you're just there assisting. Ketamine puts your brain where you need to go. Just participate with it. You know, and I'll say, just let Oz come out, look at Oz, analyze Oz, and be like, all right, brain, what are you doing? Why are we going down this path? Let's talk about this. But it's almost like, you know, when they say, you're not a depressed person, you're a person living with depression. I'm like, that's how ketamine makes you feel. Like you get to see, here you are, and you've got all these emotions around you, and you're able to talk about them. And once you process them, they go into your long-term memory, and then you don't have to feel it. So that's telling somebody in a group last night, when emotions lead you, you've not processed it effectively. We should be able to walk objectively into a room and bring up an emotion. And then that way, you know, you've got a good balance. So people who are either too emotional or too numb, they're too much on, you know, the spectrums or different sides.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what can it treat? Like I know I've read into it for depression and anxiety. What else is there that this can help with, you know, the world, the listeners?
I think PTSD, you know, that's just PTSD. So let's talk about PTSD a little bit. It helps with that for sure.
Okay.
There's a lot of people who want to call it PTS. So it's not a disorder. It's just post-traumatic stress. It's people who, the people who ruminate, who just can't let a thought go, and those who stop sleeping, who have a lot of insomnia. Those are two telltale signs, I think, that someone's struggling, you know, with mental health.
Wow.
But I think, you know, all the mood stuff, a lot of the pain pieces, so fibromyalgia, neuropathic pain, just really weird pain syndromes. Again, this is something that our kids are going through. Females around the ages of 13 and 14, they're getting weird pain syndromes in their wrists and their ankles. You know, so those are all neuropathic, which means they come from the brain. You know, I think those pieces, I think your neurodegenerative aspects, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and all those different pieces too. I think all those are going to be, or they all are affected by it. Ketamine does help with all of those. It's going to be this situation to figure out what's the best dose, how often do they need to come in. We've had people with dementia that have done very, very well. And unfortunately with dementia, they like get healed and then they don't come back. And I'm like, no. like you've got to work towards this, right? So it's different because it's not a daily medication. And that's another taboo that we're going against. I'm like, come back when you need to. We have no idea when we need to because we've been such a medicated society on take a pill once a day. I don't care how you feel, just take it. You know, so therefore we just go through life and we don't build any skills. We have no emotional intelligence, no self-introspection. And we don't really understand. And we just kind of learn to live in hell, right? I mean, that's what these people do. And I'm like, you don't have to get back in hell in order to thrive. So you want to talk about disrupting the system. That's what we're doing.
I feel like I've never experienced ketamine, not even on like a recreational level. But it's interesting because I do feel like with psychedelics, I have learned to create almost like a heaven peaceful state in my mind while the world is like chaotic around me. I'm like, I'm good, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that's what they're looking at with ketamine, you know, that is kind of like the godfather per se of the psychedelics. So there are similar mechanisms of action with ketamine as there are with, you know, MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, different pieces like that. So if you go back, if you really want to go back to ketamine's godfather or its familial cycle, ketamine is 1/50th the dose of angel dust.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
The things that we are learning on this podcast today.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask too, like where you thought, you know, with this new wave of psychedelics for healing, like if this has a place in it, but I feel like it very much does.
Oh,
even
absolutely.
Though technically it's not a psychedelic. I think people are more open to it. It's legal. Mm-hmm. And there are treatment centers now, we know.
Yeah, right, right. So ketamine, I mean, for one thing I can tell for sure, ketamine with PTSD and suicidality does wonderful. Anxiety does really well, depression, pain, all these different pieces, autism, we're seeing all kinds of different things. Traumatic brain injuries, it's a natural anti-inflammatory, so it's causing the brain to, be able to heal a little bit quicker. So all these pieces, it's going to have its own category. Psilocybin is more so like they're looking at it for more so depression, MDMA, they're looking at it for more so PTSD. They're not really looking at any psychedelics right now for the suicidality piece. What I would like to eventually see is that we actually go get help when we're like 20% needing help, instead of like right now, I feel like people are, not only are they at the last bit of their limb, but like they're 200%. Like they're so strong, they're still alive because everything we've thrown at them for the past 30 years has not been effective. So
yeah,
I think there's a lot of people wearing some purple hearts right now in mental health because their system has sucked so badly.
yeah.
Well, and a lot of people come to us with help on how they can feel better, but some people aren't, they don't want to go the mushroom route because it's not legal. So the fact that we're having this interview is just amazing because there is a facility here in Louisville.
Yeah.
Is there anybody who would have a medical condition that wouldn't be a good candidate for ketamine?
There's a lot, right? There's just a lot coming out. So, one of those that we actually look at specific. So we have our own research department to where we really, it's called translational medicine, because we just want to help and we try to really find as much evidence-based data in order to try to treat as many people as possible. One that we've heard a lot of lately is people with like schizophrenia, wondering if ketamine can help. And it used to be a contraindication, but now there's actually some studies starting to come out saying that it's actually breaking the cycle of that. So,
Wow.
another way that I look at the brain is like abstract and concrete, right? I think we need to be in the middle. And I think, that your concrete's going to be your control, your paranoid, your PTSD, your fear, catastrophic thinking. And I think your abstract is you're going to be your schizophrenics. So I feel like they're almost in the latter stages, in the end stages of mental health illness or whatever else you want to call it. But I have seen that ketamine unstacks a lot of that stuff to gets them on their base. So there's not a lot contraindications out there. They used to say liver, if you had high liver function tests or their liver enzymes. But there's a beautiful study that just came out from Awaken Life Sciences. I don't know if you know that company,
No.
but they just published in the Journal of Psychiatry. To where they're helping people to not relapse after severe alcoholism. And those people's liver enzymes actually came back down to where they were started. So their liver actually got healthier. So
Wow.
it's such a small dose. Like we've been able to give it to people who've had open heart surgeries, who've had, different kinds of morbidities that, that they've been through, and they've done really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So can you describe the process through your facilities? Like, I know we've talked a little bit recreationally with some people, and that's just not even close to the same as for healing. So can you talk us through a little bit of the process if somebody comes to your facility and wants to go through with these treatments? Like how long?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yep. So what we like to do, like we offer consultations for like anybody, right? So because a lot of people, they're like, well, I don't know, am I a candidate? I might be, because we're not even able to gauge our own mental health. We don't understand much about it. So people can call. We offer consults virtually. We offer them across the United States. So during those consultations, one of our providers will sit with somebody and for like 60 minutes, because you need to not only go over your past, like this is so different. Like we really want people to feel informed about what they're getting ready to experience, because it's not a daily medicine. So with people who have mental health conditions, they will experience six infusions over the course of 2 to 3 weeks. So it depends what you're really going for. If it's, a lot of complex trauma, that's people who have like dissociative identity disorders, borderline personalities, things like that. They need more long-term. So like 2 a week times 3 weeks is better for them. People with like chronic depression and those pieces, they do 6 infusions over the course of 2 weeks. So they do 3 infusions a week times 2 weeks, but it's 6 infusions. That's your induction cycle. And then you come back when you need to come back, which is a big piece. So our therapist, actually one of our therapists in Louisville, Dr. Robin From Tap, he's a psychologist, but he sits with people during, and then he can help with like integration sessions and such. So we really try to encourage people to continue their journey, because you just get such different angles. Like you can even think of the angles that you may be able to get, but I'll tell people it's like a basketball. You see a basketball one way, and then you get a ketamine infusion, and the basketball is still the same, but you see the lines on it completely different, to where it just changes your whole view. So the more you can work with your therapist to really understand that shift in identity, I think the more that people can really grow into themselves. So we monitor scales. We like to do scales because we are data driven, which, it's we created a scale that's very healthy, much healthier than some of the other scales, because some of the other scales I think are very triggering. But we get people to do scales prior to their infusions, just so they can help keep up with. And then we work with a company called Outcome MD, and they'll actually send you, and they'll show you like, hey, you've made 58% progress, and they're very, very good to really show you the progress that you're making, so you have something, to really compare it to. Because I've noticed when people come to us, how are you doing? Bad. Like it's so bland. So then ketamine makes everything so specific, to where if you can measure those objective points, then you can start seeing how you are growing. So we do 6 over 2 to 3 weeks. Insurance does sometimes help with some of the service. I
was just going to ask that, if insurance.
So we're working, so it helps with like the consults, it helps with the therapy piece. We're working on the infusion piece. They all want all these studies, that's honestly, I think, kind of unethical, but we're working on that. We're working on the data. Fortunately, I've kept the data from 2018, so we have some really good data, and that's what they like to see. Insurance companies like to see how it's going to save them money, and it will save them immense amounts of money.
Right.
It's so effective, right? So we work with them. We have a nonprofit that we work with as well, that I helped create, called Community Change Foundation. And it goes across the nation, and it helps, veterans, first responders, and financially disadvantaged. So, so people who even struggle, trying to pay, that's another piece that we have. And then we also have, actually I've got my unit shirt on. We've got the unit apparel that, the funds for that we raise go towards veterans and first responders to help them get coverage. And then we also have some financial companies that we work with as well. So we're trying as much as we can to give people the necessary access to it, for sure. Just takes a second.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. And when we were just searching and we found you and that you were in Louisville, we're like, yes, we have to interview them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
What's one of the best, I don't want to say success stories, because I feel like they're all kind of success stories in their own way, but like, what is one of the most, people are so result driven. They want results. They want to see worst case turn into best case scenario. Could you share an experience or something that you saw happen that would maybe really intrigue someone?
Oh yeah. It's the thing about it. You can see these all the time, right?
So, yeah, that's awesome.
So one of the 12-year-olds we had, she was out of school. She was couldn't go to school, couldn't function, different pieces like that. She got back into school. That's a big piece, I think, for any parent there. We had a kid who was 17 when he came to us, had a couple of concussions from wrestling, was pretty much psychotic after that, and was taking a whole bunch of different drugs, suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, and such. Treated him, and now he's in his 3rd year of college. Wow. We've had people who, I've had police officers that we've treated who they couldn't work, they couldn't get out of bed. And now they're actually, back at work, completely functioning. I think that's a big piece with police officers, especially because they're afraid to get help. Police officers, it's helped a lot with them understanding not only their own mental health, but then they can be more, understanding of the empathy around them. One kid we had a cranial fracture. He was supposed to be on a ventilator forever kind of thing. He ended up getting off of that, had a horrible stutter, couldn't really complete a sentence, walked with a limp, treated him, and now he's an administrator at a security company. It's like you see those deficits in the brain. It's almost like you see a hiccup in the brain. Ketamine can help that hiccup. It helps the brain to overcompensate for that, and then you can see that really start to move forward. So it's Yeah, there's just a lot of good. I mean, there's been people who go through things you just would never, wish on your worst enemy. But it's really neat to see them to be able to process those things and feel like champions of it instead of feeling like they were victims of it, So I always tell people like the first two things that people will feel is they'll feel more empowered, and then they feel more laid back. And I think that's really what we need. It's almost like to get settled in ourselves because we're so finger pointing right now.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, like feeling empowered and how that can really, like, once you feel that, you can really learn more about yourself and the way you interact with the world around you. And, so many of us project and internalize so much.
Right.
So that's huge. Do you have a question?
I mean, she's covered everything for me, and I'm just like, how can I? I want to do it.
I want to do it. I do have a question though that we weren't even thinking about. You were talking about how it can help people with like borderline personality disorder, and I'm just curious because I like histrionic disorder, like all of these sociopath. Like, is this something that could possibly
or narcissism
like help rewire their brains? Because if so, I'm like, how are you not a billionaire? Like, you need to be putting this everywhere.
Right. It's going to take, so you got to be careful with your histrionics and your narcissists and your psychopaths, or your sociopath, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Because what they've learned, right. So I do think that it will help these people eventually. But what you got to be careful with is the way that they've learned to cope in life is that they take the vulnerabilities of the audience around them, and then they are able to manipulate it to push them forward. Right. So that's a protective measure that they learned when they were younger, usually between the ages of 5 and 7, when their personality is developing, to cope that way. So I think if they understand, if they can teach those individuals how to be vulnerable, and that it's okay to let this ego down and kind of let their little baby soul, come to the surface. And it's not going to die per se with their ego not protecting them, then I think you can. I think it's going to be very difficult. It wouldn't be somebody that you'd want to start with right now, but even pediatrics. I mean, that'd be a beautiful piece, right? If you saw pediatrics starting to have some type of psychopathy, to start at a young age and put them in a treatment protocol that way, I think that would be amazing.
Especially before it gets too 20, 30 years in, like catch it while it's young.
Right. Yeah. Because the teenagers are so plastic, right? They're so easy to shape, and they're just looking for something, and they don't really know. They don't have the path or the direction that they feel is right yet. So when you give them, ketamine infusions, different things like that, you got them in there with a therapist who's helping them to understand their true sense of worth, their core values, different things like that. Then they really start moving in the right direction. So yeah, the teenagers are beautiful with this. They do a really, really good job.
This is amazing. Yeah. I'm so happy that you're here doing this work for so many people, and you're,
helping so many.
I love that you went down a path that you didn't know it was going to take you here.
Yeah. Somebody asked me earlier in a meeting, they're like, where are you going to be in 5 years? And I was like, 4 years ago, I wouldn't have guessed I'd have been here. So I'm not going to tell you that I know anything right now in 5 years.
You're like, wherever life takes me, I guess.
Didn't think we would be doing this.
No,
but here we are. Yeah, we both are former business owners, so.
Very different paths.
Well, and it's cool to see women in the roles as well, It's just, it's new, right? And it's evolving, and it's going to take all of us to help create change.
Yeah, we're creating a
So for people who are listening, how can they schedule a consult at one of your locations?
The Revitalist, so Revitalist Louisville.com. Okay. Revitalistlouisville.com has a lot of really good data on there, has a lot of videos, has a lot of good, different pieces that way. But call their number on the Revitalist Louisville piece, and they can get you scheduled with a consult. We have awesome care team members that help people to understand exactly, questions when they want to ask, right? So, and different things like that. So we don't schedule people just out of the blue, not them understanding like what they're coming into.
Right.
We try to give a little bit of insight, but then again, we can give as much insight as we want to give, and their brains are they're different. All of our brains are different. They're similar, but they're different. So I'll give you. So the number that they would call would be 771-8531.
Okay.
I'm just curious now, where are your other locations? Because we do have listeners all over, but you don't have to give all the information, just where.
We have 4 in Tennessee.
Wow.
We have Louisville, of course, Raleigh, North Carolina, Bethesda, Maryland, which is right out of D.C., Detroit, Michigan, and Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow.
Yep.
You are a boss.
Rock star.
We're trying.
Rock star.
You answered so many of our questions. We are just so grateful that you did this interview with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we are so excited to share this with our listeners. So
yeah, absolutely. And if they have any questions, I'm always around. I always like to, inform people, and we've really got a lot of awesome people with us too. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're excited to spread the word.
Awesome. So thank you so much. I'm so excited to have met you. All right.
Well, let me know when you want part 2. We'll hop on again.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We'll make that happen. Thank you.
Okay. All right, ladies. Thanks so much for your time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Holy shit.
Holy freaking shit.
I was like, do I say holy fucking shit? That's a lot. That's a big word.
I know.
But yeah, that just rocked my world.
So much information that neither of us knew.
Like my mind just doing
and
this,
she was
the whole
just
time.
like every sentence we were just looking at each other like, wow. Wow. So throughout this podcast, you're just going to hear me go, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. We should turn that into a reel somehow. Like there's got to be a reel about that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
So we hope you guys enjoyed that. We hope you guys got some information out of that, gained some clarity, maybe had some questions answered. And if not, check them out online.
Yes. Yes, they are, their number is 502-324-7868. And again, she stated that they do consults, so they're much more informative during the consult. You're not just going to go in and they're, going to do it. There's a process, and you're going to be very, very informed throughout that process. And if you want to check out their website, it is revitalistlouisville.com. So Revitalist is Revitalist, Louisville.com.
And they also are on Instagram, real quick.
I
mean, there's so many of them. So like there's either Revitalist, it's just Revitalist, or there's Revitalist Louisville. And if you're in other parts of the world or US, they have, Johnson City, I don't know, Chattanooga, Detroit. I think she said Jacksonville. So yeah, they'll pop up.
Yep.
On Instagram. So we hope you guys check them out, give them a follow, give them a shout out, tell them where you found them. Mm-hmm. Not that we're getting any like kickbacks or anything,
no.
but
it's still cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So we hope to see you guys
on the other side.
Bye.